The most entitled 19-year-old I ever saw walked into my courtroom, pulled out her father's Senate ID badge, and told me I was making a career-ending mistake. Her name was Madison Pierce, daughter of Senator Richard Pierce. By the time she left 10 minutes later, she was in handcuffs, and her father's political career was about to face the biggest scandal of his life. You know, in all my years on this bench, and we're talking over 40 years here, you think you've seen everything. Entitled kids. Sure, I've seen plenty of those rich people who think money buys them out of trouble almost every week. But what walked into my courtroom that cold Tuesday morning in November was something different, something that made my blood run cold, because it wasn't just about one spoiled teenager. It was about systematic corruption that had been hiding behind a badge for years. Let me back up and tell you how this day started. I got to court early, like I always do. 8:15 in the morning. I've been doing it for 40 years. My father taught me, Frank, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. So there I was with Christina's coffee, strong black coffee, the Italian way, reviewing my docket for the day. And I see this name there, Madison Pierce. 12 traffic violations in 4 months. Now 12 violations in 4 months. That's not careless driving. That's not bad luck. That's someone who genuinely believes traffic laws are suggestions for other people. But before we get to Madison, before we see what happened when she walked into my courtroom and flashed that badge like it was some kind of magical immunity card, I want to ask you something. If you believe that nobody should be above the law, not senators, not their children, not anyone with power or money, then subscribe to Judge Caprio Files right now. Hit that subscribe button, because we share stories about real justice for real people. And tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed someone use their family's power to avoid consequences? Drop your story below. I read every single comment. Now, the first case that morning wasn't Madison. It was a woman named Mrs. Kesha Washington. And I want you to remember her name because she becomes important later in this story. Mrs. Washington was 34 years old, single mother of 2 kids, worked as a nursing assistant at Rhode Island Hospital. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The hardest shift there is. She took 2 buses to get to work every single night because she couldn't afford a car that wouldn't break down. She was standing at my bench that morning wearing her scrubs, came straight from her shift, exhausted, apologetic, hands trembling. "Your Honor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I was wrong, but my mama." And that's when she started crying. Not dramatic crying, not trying to get sympathy, just quiet, exhausted tears of someone who's been carrying too much for too long. Here's what happened to Mrs. Washington. At 3 a.m., she got a call that her mother, who was watching her 2 kids, had a stroke. She had to leave work mid-shift, had to get to the hospital where her mother was. She parked illegally in her panic, ran inside, and by the time she came back out 2 hours later, there was a $75 parking ticket on her windshield. "Mrs. Washington," I said gently, "tell me about your mother's condition. She's still in ICU, Your Honor," she replied, wiping her eyes with a tissue that looked like it had already been used a few times. "And your children?" "They're 8 and 11, staying with my neighbor. She's been so kind, but I can't keep asking her. And your job?" "I might lose it, Your Honor. I've already missed 3 shifts. I looked at this woman, this hard-working mother who was holding her family together with sheer willpower and determination, and I thought about my own mother, how she worked 3 jobs when I was a kid after my father got hurt at the construction site, how I watched her count pennies at the grocery store, watched her choose between buying herself a winter coat or making sure we had food on the table. "Mrs. Washington," I said, "you're a hero for taking care of your family. Ticket dismissed. Court costs waived. Go be with your mother." The relief on her face, the way her shoulders dropped like she'd been carrying the world, and someone finally helped her set it down. "That's why I love this job. Thank you, Judge," she whispered. "God bless you." She turned to leave, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood pressure start to rise. In the back of my courtroom in the gallery, where people wait for their cases, there were two young women sitting together. Designer clothes, expensive handbags, both of them on their phones, and they were laughing. Not just smiling, laughing, covering their mouths, trying not to be too loud, but failing. One of them, a blonde girl with sunglasses pushed up on her head, even though we were indoors, whispered something to her friend, and they both giggled. They were laughing at Mrs. Washington, laughing at a mother's tears, laughing at a woman who was terrified about losing her job and her mother in the same week. Officer Rodriguez, my bailiff, he noticed too. I saw him look at those girls, saw his jaw tighten, saw him make a mental note. Good cops notice disrespect. They remember it. And Rodriguez is one of the best. Christina, my court clerk, who's been with me for 20 years, called the next case. "Madison Pierce," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. 12 traffic violations over 4 months. And up walks the blonde girl who'd been laughing at Mrs. Washington. Madison Pierce, 19 years old, and she didn't walk to my bench. She strutted like she was on a runway, like my courtroom was some kind of fashion show, and she was the star attraction. Let me paint you a picture of what Madison Pierce looked like that morning. Designer jeans that probably cost more than Mrs. Washington makes in a week. Gucci purse swinging from her shoulder. Balenciaga sneakers, the kind that cost $900, and those sunglasses, expensive designer sunglasses, still perched on top of her head indoors. But that's not what bothered me most. What bothered me was the AirPods. She had AirPods in both ears, and she was looking at her phone as she approached my bench. Not a care in the world, not a shred of respect for where she was or what was happening. "Miss Pierce," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional, "please remove your sunglasses and earbuds." She sighed, actually sighed like I had just asked her to do something incredibly unreasonable. She took out one AirPod, just one, and left the other one in her ear, pushed the sunglasses up higher on her head, but didn't take them off. And then she said, "Can we make this quick? I have brunch reservations at 11 Schwarz." Brunch reservations? A woman had just stood in that exact same spot, crying about her mother having a stroke, and this teenager was worried about brunch reservations at the country club. I looked around my courtroom. Christina had stopped typing and was just staring at Madison. Officer Rodriguez's expression had gone completely flat. That look cops get when they're professionally containing their disgust. Mrs. Washington was still in the gallery waiting for her parking validation, and I could see the shock on her face. Other defendants waiting for their cases were exchanging glances, shaking their heads. Everyone could feel it. The disrespect was so thick in the air you could cut it with a knife. I took a breath. In 40 years on this bench, I've learned that sometimes young people just don't understand courtroom protocol. Sometimes they're nervous and it comes out as attitude. Sometimes they just need a gentle reminder about where they are and what's expected. So I tried again. "Miss Pierce," I said, "this is a court of law. I need your full attention and respect." She looked up from her phone finally and said, "Obviously." Then she turned to her friend in the gallery and said, Sarah, did you see Jessica's Instagram from the Hamptons? That yacht is insane. She was having a conversation with her friend while I was trying to explain why she was in court. While I was trying to address 12 traffic violations that could have killed someone. Miss Pierce, I said, raising my voice slightly to get her attention back. You need to focus on this proceeding. She turned back to me with this expression of pure annoyance, like I was the one being unreasonable. Sorry, Judge, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Look, can we speed this up? Like I said, I've got plans. That's when I started reading her violations out loud. I wanted everyone in that courtroom to hear exactly what Madison Pierce had been doing for the past 4 months. Speeding in a school zone 45 Babith in a 20 zone right outside Washington Elementary when kids were arriving for class. Running a red light on Benefit Street. Illegal parking in handicap spaces not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. Parking in fire lanes twice. Blocking a crosswalk near the senior center where elderly people were trying to cross safely. Reckless driving in a residential neighborhood, failure to yield. Nearly hitting a pedestrian, texting while driving, caught on traffic camera. Expired registration 6 months overdue, no proof of insurance at a traffic stop. Disrespecting an officer during that stop. And leaving the scene before the ticket was fully issued. Miss Pierce, I said after reading through all of these aren't mistakes. This is a pattern of believing traffic laws don't apply to you. And you know what she said? Judge, everyone speeds in school zones when there's no kids around. And those handicap spots, half the time nobody's using them. I was just running into Starbucks like 5 minutes max. Just running into Starbucks 5 minutes max. Like handicap spaces are first come, first served parking for whoever happens to be in a hurry that day. Miss Pierce, I explained, trying to keep my patience. Handicap spaces aren't available to anyone when they appear empty. They're reserved for people with disabilities who need them. They might arrive 5 seconds after you park there, and then they can't park because you decided getting your coffee was more important than their legal right. Too accessible parking, she shrugged. Actually shrugged at me. Whatever, she said. Look, how much is this going to cost? I'll Venmo the fine right now, and we can all move on. Venmo the fine. Like justice is just another app transaction. Like consequences are just inconvenient fees you pay with your phone so you can keep doing whatever you want. I could feel my blood pressure rising. That familiar feeling when you realize someone fundamentally doesn't understand that their actions affect other people. Miss Pierce, I said, this isn't about paying a fine and moving on. At 19 years old, with this pattern of violations, you're demonstrating a dangerous disregard for public safety. And that's when Madison said something that made my blood boil. Public safety. Judge, with all due respect, there are like actual criminals out there, murderers and drug dealers and stuff. And you're worried about parking tickets. This is such a waste of everyone's time. Then she gestured back toward Mrs. Washington, who was still sitting quietly in the gallery, like that lady crying about $75. That's the kind of case you should be handling. Poor people who can't manage their money. I can afford my fines, so why are we even here? The courtroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Madison Pierce had just called Mrs. Washington, a hard-working single mother dealing with a family medical emergency, someone who couldn't manage their money. She just dismissed a woman's pain and struggle as beneath the court's attention, and she'd done it with this casual cruelty, like she was commenting on the weather. I looked at Mrs. Washington. Her face showed visible hurt, tears forming in her eyes again. She started to stand up, and Officer Rodriguez gently put his hand on her shoulder, whispered something. She sat back down, but I could see the pain on her face. Other defendants in the courtroom were shaking their heads. One elderly man muttered something under his breath. Even Madison's friend Sarah looked uncomfortable, suddenly very interested in her phone, probably wishing she was anywhere else. "Miss Pierce," I said, and my voice was colder now, that patient tone completely gone. Mrs. Washington wasn't crying about money. She was crying because she was worried about her mother who had a stroke. That's called empathy. That's called being a human being who cares about other people. Madison looked at me with this blank expression like I just spoke in a foreign language she didn't understand. Okay. Well, that's not really my problem, is it? Not her problem. A fellow human being suffering wasn't her problem. And right there in that moment, I understood that this wasn't just about traffic violations anymore. This was about a complete absence of basic human decency. "Miss Pierce," I said, standing up from my bench, which is something I rarely do, but when I do, people know I'm serious. "Your attitude in this courtroom is making your situation significantly worse. I strongly suggest you adjust your approach." She actually laughed. "Or what? You'll give me a lecture?" "My dad gives me lectures all the time. Doesn't really work." Then she turned to her friend Sarah in the gallery. "Sarah, is this almost over? Text Jessica that we might be late." She was texting about brunch plans while I was trying to explain to her why nearly hitting a pedestrian with her car matters. I thought about my father right then, how he taught me that every person deserves respect, regardless of their bank account or their job or their circumstances, how he worked 3 jobs after his injury and never once complained, never once acted like the world owed him something, never once treated another human being like they were beneath his notice. The contrast between my father's values and Madison Pierce's entitlement was staggering. "Miss Pierce," I said, "based on your driving record and your attitude in this courtroom, I'm sentencing you to the following: 2,500 lirs in fines, 60 days license suspension, 80 hours of community service, mandatory defensive driving course, and 30 days in county jail with work release." The courtroom gasped. Madison's mouth dropped open. Her friend Sarah actually put her phone down for the first time. "What?" Madison shouted, her voice echoing through my courtroom. "You can't do that." "Jail for parking tickets, for 12 violations showing reckless endangerment," I explained calmly, including nearly hitting a pedestrian, for expired registration and no insurance, which are misdemeanors, for your contemptuous behavior in this court, for demonstrating that you are a danger to public safety and have absolutely no remorse for your actions. That's when Madison pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my father," she announced. "This is insane, Miss Pierce," I said, my voice firm. "Put the phone away or I'll add contempt charges." She ignored me completely, just started dialing, held the phone to her ear. "Daddy, yeah, I'm in court, and this judge is being completely unreasonable. He's trying to send me to jail for parking tickets. You need to do something about this right now." Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. "Miss Pierce, the judge gave you an order. Put the phone away." Madison held up one finger at him like telling him to wait. Like a bailiff, giving her a lawful order was just an interruption to her phone call. "Hold on, Daddy," she said into the phone. "Some bailiff is trying to intimidate me." That's when she reached into her designer Gucci purse. "You know what?" she said, and there was this shift in her tone, like she just remembered she had a trump card. "Maybe this will help you understand who you're dealing with." She pulled out a leather badge holder, expensive leather, the kind that costs a couple $100, and she opened it with this flourish, like a magician, revealing the final trick. Inside was a badge, UNITEDSTATSENATSENATORICHARDPIERCEOFICIALCREDENTIALS. She held it up high, making sure everyone in the courtroom could see it, made sure I could see it clearly from my bench. "This is my father's Senate badge," she announced, her voice loud and clear and full of confidence. "He's Senator Richard Pierce, Judiciary Committee. He oversees federal court nominations. So maybe, Judge," she emphasized that word like it was an insult, "you should think very carefully about what you're doing here." The entire courtroom froze. Christina's mouth actually dropped open. Officer Rodriguez immediately reached for his radio. Mrs. Washington gasped. Other defendants just stared in complete disbelief. Even Sarah, Madison's friend, looked uncomfortable now, like she knew Madison had just crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. In 40 years on this bench, I've had people threaten me. I've had drug dealers imply that I should watch my back. I've had organized crime figures make vague comments about knowing where I live. But I have never, not once, had a teenager flash a federal government badge at me like it was a get-out-of-jail-free card. Like her father's position in the United States Senate gave her immunity from state law. I thought about my father again, how he came to this country from Italy with nothing but hope and a willingness to work hard, how he respected every authority figure he ever encountered, even when those authority figures didn't always show him the same respect back. How he taught me that badges and titles mean nothing if the people wearing them use them to intimidate rather than to serve. And I thought about Mrs. Washington, still sitting in my courtroom, watching this entitled teenager wave her father's power around, while Mrs. Washington couldn't even afford $75 parking ticket without worrying about feeding her kids. "Miss Pierce," I said, and my voice was ice-cold now. "Are you attempting to use your father's federal position to influence the outcome of your case?" Madison smiled, actually smiled like she thought she'd already won. "I'm not attempting anything," she said. "I'm telling you facts. My father is a United States Senator. He knows judges. He knows governors. He knows the Attorney General. He knows people who could make your life very difficult. Judge Caprio." That's when she waved the badge again, like punctuating her threat. "So here's what's going to happen," she continued, and her voice had gotten louder, more aggressive, all that fake politeness completely gone now. "You're going to dismiss all these ridiculous charges. I'm going to walk out of here, and we're going to forget this ever happened, because if you don't, my father will make one phone call, and you'll be hearing from people way above your pay grade. Do you understand me?" My father's voice echoed in my head right then. "Frank," he used to say in his thick Italian accent, "the biggest criminals are sometimes the ones who believe their last name protects them. Don't ever let a badge, any badge, intimidate you from doing what's right." I stood up from my bench slowly, deliberately, and I looked directly at Madison Pierce. "Miss Pierce," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying through the entire silent courtroom. "You just committed a federal crime in my courtroom. Officer Rodriguez, please place Miss Pierce under arrest for attempting to use federal credentials to obstruct justice, intimidation of a court official, and contempt of court." Madison's face went from confident to confused to panicked in about 3 seconds. "You can't arrest me," she screamed. "Do you know who my father is?" "I know exactly who your father is," I replied, and I'm betting he's about to be very disappointed in his daughter." Officer Rodriguez approached her calmly, professionally. "Miss Pierce," he said, "please turn around and place your hands behind your back." That's when Madison completely lost it. "Don't touch me," she screamed, backing away. "My father will have your badge. This is illegal. This is abuse of power. Sarah, record this. Record everything." Her friend Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "Madison, maybe you should just—" Sarah started to say, but Madison cut her off. "Shut up, Sarah. Just film this." Officer Rodriguez remained calm, kept his voice level. "Madison Pierce, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." Madison tried to pull away from him. "I don't need rights," she screamed at the top of her lungs. "I have a senator for a father." Officer Rodriguez called for backup on his radio, and Officer Chen entered the courtroom. Together they carefully and professionally secured Madison's hands behind her back, in handcuffs. She was thrashing, screaming, completely out of control. "You're all going to lose your jobs," she yelled. "My father will destroy this courthouse. I'm going to sue all of you. This is assault. This is police brutality." During the struggle, the Senate badge fell out of her hands. It hit the courtroom floor with a clatter, landed face up with the seal visible. Officer Chen bent down, picked it up carefully, and placed it in an evidence bag. "That badge will be held as evidence of attempted intimidation," I said, as they led Madison toward the door in handcuffs. Still screaming, still threatening, Mrs. Washington stood up. "Your Honor," she said quietly, but her voice carried through the courtroom. "Thank you for showing my kids that justice really does work the same for everyone." Madison heard her. She turned her head and screamed at Mrs. Washington, "Shut up, you nobody. You're nothing." That was it. That was the final straw. "Miss Pierce," I said, and every ounce of patience I had was gone now. "Mrs. Washington is worth 10 of you. She works 2 jobs to support her family. She has dignity and grace under pressure. She understands what respect means. Those are things your father's Senate seat can't buy for you. Take her away, Officer Rodriguez." As they took Madison out of my courtroom, her screams echoing down the hallway, the other defendants started clapping. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet appreciation. The elderly veteran who'd been sitting in the gallery came up to my bench. "Judge," he said, "I served in Korea and Vietnam. I've seen a lot of entitled people in my life, but what you just did, holding someone accountable, regardless of who their daddy is, that's what I fought for. Thank you. If you believe that badge or no badge, Senate connections or not, everyone deserves equal justice, then subscribe to Judge Caprio Files right now. We tell the stories that remind us why our system matters. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed someone use their family's power to avoid consequences? I want to hear your experiences. Now let me tell you what happened after they took Madison away. Within 30 minutes of her arrest, my phone started ringing. The first call was from Senator Pierce himself. "Judge Caprio," the voice on the other end said, "this is Senator Richard Pierce. I need to understand what happened in your courtroom today." "Senator," I replied, keeping my voice professional, "your daughter attempted to use your federal credentials to obstruct justice. She threatened this court with your position and your connections. She showed contempt for the legal process and for every person in that courtroom." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then Senator Pierce spoke again, and his voice was different. Quieter, strained. "Judge," he said, "I need to apologize. not as a senator, but as a father who clearly failed to teach his daughter some fundamental values. My daughter was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I'm not calling to ask for special treatment. I'm calling to tell you that whatever consequences she faces, she needs to face them. That surprised me. I'd expected anger, threats, political pressure. Instead, I was hearing a father who understood that his daughter had crossed a line. "Senator," I said, "I appreciate your honesty. Your daughter committed several crimes today. The attempted use of federal credentials to obstruct justice is particularly serious." "I understand," he replied, "and Judge, I never taught her that our family was above the law. But I clearly failed to teach her that we're not. That's on me." After I hung up with the senator, I did some research. I pulled Madison's full driving record, not just the 12 violations that brought her to my courtroom, but everything. What I found made me sick to my stomach. 47 total violations, not 12, 47, starting from when she first got her license at 16 years old. And all but these most recent 12 had been administratively dismissed. Every single one had a notation, courtesy, Senate, office. For 3 years, someone in Senator Pierce's office had been making phone calls, making Madison's violations disappear, teaching her that badges work, that connections matter, that laws are for other people. She didn't learn her entitlement from nowhere. She learned it from results. Every time she got pulled over and someone made it go away, she learned that she was different, special, above the rules. Mrs. Washington came back to my chambers later that afternoon. She'd stayed at the courthouse, wanted to thank me personally. "Judge," she said, "my son Marcus is 11 years old. He was asking me why that girl thought she was better than us. I told him she doesn't know any better because nobody ever taught her. But you taught her today, Judge. You taught all of us that the law really protects everyone equally. That's a lesson my kids will remember forever." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't really about punishing Madison Pierce. This was about every kid like Marcus who needed to believe the system works fairly. Every parent like Mrs. Washington who teaches their children to respect authority because they believe that authority will respect them back. If I'd let Madison walk out of that courtroom, I'd have told Marcus that his mother was wrong, that powerful people do get special treatment, that badges and last names matter more than laws, and I'd have told Madison that she was right all along.